Chapter 7. Remember, the boys had just broken into the Caribou Club, which apparently is a big fancy nightclub that was abandoned, and they're pretty excited to make it their little private hideout. Billy and I planned to spring our idea of the Caribou Club on Masick and Taylor at a backyard sleepover. 3 of us set up a tent in Taylor's backyard where we had convinced our parents we would spend the night, and we waited for Billy to get back from his grandmother's check-in. God, that guy can't get away to do anything, observed Taylor, who never seemed to have anyone at home to answer to. Oh, he's just not a very good liar, said Masick. Are you, I asked, seriously wanting to understand this exacting science. Are you kidding? Right now, my mom thinks we're all going to sleep in this tent so we can get enough experience to join Boy Scouts. And she thinks the tent's at Billy's and not here at Taylor's. Taylor and I both looked incredulous. I make it a point to never tell my mom the truth about where I'm going and what I'm up to. That way, there's never any doubt that I can pull off a big lie if I need to. What if she catches you? Then I tell another lie. That's when parents least expect you to lie, see, is when you've been caught in one. The whole trick is to tell them what they want to hear, not some dumb excuse. We shook our heads, me with disbelief and Taylor with sheer awe. Billy brightened my mood when he trotted up the driveway with a 6-pack of Coke under his arm. Look what Grandma gave us. She said we ought to make a party of it. How could you lie to a lady like that? Dinner at Taylor's was bologna sandwiches and soup slurped up at the kitchen table while Taylor's mom watched TV. We gulped and bolted to the Green Gully. I hadn't told the others about the Caribou Club. I had been eager at first, even that morning. I had carried the story on the front of my tongue, rehearsing the sales pitch I would give for making that our hangout. But when actually faced with the excitement of 2 of my new and possibly fragile friendships, I relented. This would be the right time. When we finished the lean-to in the gully, it was just big enough for the 4 of us to lie down in. I cut alders to close the open front of the shelter while Billy and Taylor worked with a big sheet of plastic we discovered in the alley behind an empty house. The lean-to was dark and cold, but no one admitted it, and instead we shared our dreams to make it larger and fancier. Well, you know, at home we had a back seat of a car in our tree fort, I bragged. Right, said Taylor. You hauled a big, heavy car seat up in a tree. If you're going to be as good a liar as me, you better do better than that. Yeah, well, my brother helped me, I said. I bet we could get something like that down here. There's a ton of old junky cars in this neighborhood. If we have food, this place wouldn't be so bad, said Taylor. Well, there's still the bugs. This place is mosquito heaven. I decided right then that it was the moment to sell the Caribou Club. Food, bugs, who cares, said Masick. I brought the good stuff. From his pocket, he pulled a pack of Camels, which were so bent that pulling one complete cigarette from the pack would be impossible. Well, why didn't you just run over him with a car next time, moron? Chatted Taylor. He pulled a pack of matches from his pocket and accepted a broken half of a filterless cigarette. Taylor lit up first, puffing boldly with smoke billowing up into his eyes. We all laughed and coughed as he danced around the tiny hut with a burnt lip. Then he offered me one. I said, "Those gave my dad a heart attack. No thanks." They all froze and stared at me. That must have been something, said Billy. Your dad had a heart attack, said Masick. I thought cigarettes only gave you cancer. They're bad for your heart, too. My dad had 2 heart attacks and the second one killed him. I never said it out loud before and it surprised me. Were you there, when it happened? Asked Masick. I was there for the first one, I answered, and suddenly the story just poured out of me. It happened one morning when we were all asleep. He had a big pain in his chest and Mom was yelling, and somehow we got in the car in our pajamas. Everything was messed up. I was in the front seat with my sister, Mary, and my brother was driving. Mom and Dad were in the back seat. Dad's head was on Mom's lap right behind Joe, but I couldn't look. Joe was just driving so fast that he slid around every corner. But inside, that car was silent. Mom and us didn't say a word. It was like 50 miles and no one saying anything, and Joe sliding on the corners. The whole sound was Dad moaning and Mary crying. Finally, we skidded into the hospital parking lot, and Joe laid on that horn, and an army of nurses poured out and hauled Dad into the building. Us kids just sat outside in the cold, staring at the glass doors until Mom came back out and told Joe to take us home. Then I climbed in the back seat of that station wagon. Man, I admitted I was so scared, just really, really scared. Nothing was ever the same after that, because Dad survived that one, but not for long. Then I just shut up and looked away from the other boys, surprised at how much I'd revealed. I grabbed the cigarettes from Masick and crushed them in my hand. No cigarettes in our hangout, I growled. That's rule number 1. The guy sat for a minute, and then Taylor blurted, "I gotta pee." And when he came back, he said, "If this is gonna be a real hangout, then we gotta keep it secret." That became rule number 2. And no one can bring anybody here without permission of the rest of us, even girls, added Billy. Business finished, we settled back to enjoy our getaway. Each of us had come prepared with comic books, but it was too dark to read in the smoky lean-to, so we told jokes and ghost stories. After a while, I wondered nervously why this wasn't more fun. The location was fine, but it was just a lean-to in the woods, and there was no getting around the mosquitoes. I swatted one for effect, and when the rain started rattling on the metal roof, that was the last straw. I decided right then I'd get him to move to the Caribou Club. I couldn't help thinking about the Caribou Club and how it might be the best hangout ever. A real place with walls and size, and it was there in the middle of all the things that weren't ours. It'd be so bold to have a hangout right in plain sight. I was glad when the others got restless too, and we decided to head for Taylor's house, where we crowded into the tent. Here our little quartet suffered much the same joy we shared in the Smoky Fort, and I fell asleep much sooner than I expected, not even lasting to play strip poker, which was Masick's big plan for the evening. I woke in the pale dusk of the Alaska summer night. Taylor was crawling through the tent flap. He carried all the makings for peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. "Hungry?" he asked, smiling like the fox fresh from the chicken house. Well, once we'd finished our too early breakfast, Taylor made an announcement. "Gentlemen, I've got a mission for us." "It's got to be 3 in the morning, Taylor," I growled. "I know. That means the time has come for action." "Nope," I said, "I'm not going until I know where and why." I was surprised at my forcefulness. "Okay, here it is. I know where we can get more comics, the latest ones, for free." "Yeah, right." "I swear, cross my heart, hope to die." Why did I believe a guy who took pride in his lies almost as much as Masick? Why did I agree to go even if it was true? Why not? The other 2 took no convincing at all, and so we were off, sneaking first along the alley behind Taylor's neighbors, and then walking boldly, looking and listening for cars, cop cars especially. Already my heart was beating too fast, and I was panting, just walking, and I was panting. We didn't look at each other, so I felt alone in my tension, in my fear. What was I doing? Mom said I was supposed to go to Taylor's, nowhere else, not out running around the streets at 3 in the morning, not stealing comic books, not following a dedicated liar in some stupid adventure. My heart pounded. I might be starting to get sick of Masick and Taylor already, but man, this was exciting. Along the main street, a small shopping center had developed across from the Big G Drive-In. That was our destination. We passed the Texaco station with its giant star, now dim in the pre-dawn gray, and paused behind the station dumpster, and then dashed across the street. 4 sweaty bodies pressed against the cinder blocks of a beauty parlor. I took inventory and concluded that Taylor was either headed for the drugstore or the grocery. Surely Taylor didn't intend to break in. Not me. That was a line I wouldn't cross. We edged around the corner and stopped cold. A police car was moving, so slowly we didn't even hear it. But there it sat like a great cat on the search for mice. The black and white Ford purred slowly through the parking lot of the shopping center, streaming its spotlight through the windows of the stores that formed an L around the empty rectangle of concrete. Masick gasped and might have yelled if Taylor hadn't knocked him down as he turned to dash for cover. Billy grabbed my shoulder and spun me so fast that we were stumbling over Masick just as he bounced to his knees. Taylor waited for no one. He dashed to the shadows and gestured desperately as we crawled, rolled, and stumbled through the alley littered to the shadows offered by the beauty parlor. As I crawled into the safety of the darkness, I snuck a quick look at the police car that still idled through the parking lot. "We're dead if he sees us," declared Taylor. "You stupid jerks." "We gotta run for it," I said between breaths. "You're not caught until you're caught." As soon as I could inhale, I was going to be running. There were enough houses, cars, bushes, and dumpsters that I knew I could hide one scared kid. And if I had to, I could completely disappear. Then I could go home, get in bed, and be safe in like 15 minutes. This could be all over. It could be history if I could only breathe. "Hang loose," ordered Billy, calmly and slowly. "He didn't see us." "How do you know?" Masick said. There was surrender in his voice, too. Panic. "Look for yourself. He's not moving like he would if he had spotted us. Just hang loose. Be cool." So we hung loose. We waited for what felt like hours. And slowly, miraculously, the patrol car moved away, cruising across the lot and onto the street. As we let out our collective breaths, Taylor pointed to the 6 tiny bundles tied up with string. They lay just steps away from us in front of the drugstore. But they were out in the open, and we were hugging the wall in the shadows. "Comics," whispered Taylor. We gaped at the stacks of comic books before us on the sidewalk, left there for the drugstore, or for us. They lay there with the crumpled paper cups and cigarette butts outside the metal fence and heavy bars that protected the other merchandise of the store. Taylor hadn't lied. "You mean they just drop them there?" "Yep. The trucks come by sometime after midnight and just drops them at the door, just like your morning paper." He was obviously quite proud of himself. I wished suddenly again that I was home. I should have run when that cop showed up, and now I was caught with no real reason to leave and show the guys my yellow stripe. I was so unprepared, so lacking in training for any kind of heist like this. What opportunity did a hot Homestead kid have for such larceny? "Let's go," Billy hissed. The tension leaked out from between his teeth and through his clenched fingers. Masick was all jitters and kept dancing like he had to go. I sure did. In fact, I unzipped right there and let my tension splatter all the already yellow wall of the beauty parlor. Of course, that's when they launched the final assault. The last ounce of my urine spilled down the front of me as I turned to follow my compadres. For miles, it seemed, we raced down the sidewalk, past the barbershop, past the dry cleaners, past the pet store. I was out of breath when we swept by the pool hall and then the sewing shop. "This is too far. We'll be seen," I thought. "Turn back before we're caught," and me with pee running down my leg. Before I could chicken out, Taylor was there, and without breaking stride, he scooped the first bundle and disappeared around the building. I couldn't run anymore, but I did. It was like those dreams when you run from some monster, but your feet go nowhere and nowhere forever, and you wake up screaming. But I couldn't wake up, and now Billy was there, and he grabbed and disappeared. I had followed Masick's chubby butt for its whole jiggling romp toward the comics, but I got there at the same time, and his panting roared louder than the echoes of our kids slapping the concrete. 2 hands on one bundle. I swore and grabbed another, but before I could disappear around the corner, Taylor and Billy reappeared with panic showing in their sweat. "Cops!" Without looking to see the cop car enter the parking lot, I tucked my bundle like a football, pivoted, and dashed past the other boys in their hideaway. I wanted distance, so I ran for the sanctuary of the beauty parlor, as if some magic would protect me if I just returned to that wall I'd marked with my pee. They joined me. Masick's bundle went up and came down like a grenade, splattering Time magazines all over the no parking zone. I had to pee again. I led the escape past the storefronts, past the echoes of our running feet, past the wall I had just marked like a dog, I was drowning in sweat and about to wet my pants. Where did all this pee come from? A row of dumpsters lined the back of the grocery store, and there we hid, hovering on throbbing feet with our guts rammed up in our throats so we couldn't breathe. Once more, the cop car rolled slowly past us. Too slowly. Keep rolling, I whispered. I had never been that scared before. Even on water, when the big waves were at our skiff, I hadn't been that scared. Or maybe it was guilt more than fear that bothered me. This was supposed to be exciting and fun, but it was neither. The cop car kept driving and left the lot. But suddenly, I didn't want to be a thief. I didn't even like comics that much. For the first time, I actually looked at the bundle in my arms. I tore away the newsprint and the cotton string. A bright picture appeared, a photograph of a delightful chocolate cake. Red print promising a recipe and diet tips inside. Ladies' Home Journal. That's all for Chapter 7. We'll be back soon with Chapter 8. Well, are you ready for some more Sam Barker? We're heading into Chapter 6 after Sam has just been caught trespassing in the railroad yards and made the amazing discovery that there were kind people in the world. Chapter 6. Several days after the raid on the railroad yard, I made my way down Hollywood Drive and across Bluff Road to a neighborhood of small houses where Billy lived. He brought his bike and we headed down the street with no destination in mind. We were nomads, free from supervision, chores, or other activities devised by adults. Don't you just hate it, Billy said. They tell us when to wake up and they tell us when to eat and what. Yeah, my mom still reminds me to go pee, like I might forget. And every day there's a chore list. Mom leaves it on the table every morning like the newspaper. Billy was quiet for a moment. Well, in a way, I'm lucky, I guess. No chores. Not many, anyway. Then his voice changed, got low and serious. Actually, I don't even have a mom right now. Not here, anyway. Really? I looked around like someone might be listening. Yeah, she and my dad split up and she went off to California to get her head together, whatever that means. I'm sorry, man. That stinks. Now it was my turn to sound serious. I know how that is. My dad isn't coming back ever. Yeah, Masick told me. He said you told him you were an orphan, but he said you aren't. Well, when one parent dies, you are an orphan, I argued. I looked it up. Billy chuckled and I glared at him, wondering what was amusing. Sorry, it just sounds funny, you looking it up. You must be some kind of bookworm who does good in school. Well, I used to be. Boy, not me. It's all I can do to keep out of the special class. I guess it's 'cause I've been to too many schools with us moving a lot. And now I'm here at Grandma's while Dad's overseas. Overseas? Where? Is he a soldier? He's in Vietnam, and he's a soldier, so he's got to go. He works on helicopters. That part's cool. That would be cool, being in a real battle and all. Yeah, but I wish he was here. I bet, I said, a little envious of a guy who could look forward to his dad coming home. You'll make friends here. Heck, we'll do it together. And this school year, we'll be the big shots in 9th grade, you and me. If I'm still here. Oh, of course you'll be here. You got to help me. It's going to be totally different for me. Last year, I was in a class with 15 kids. Can you believe it? Central Junior High must have like 100 freshmen. That'll be cool, if we're not in jail. We both laughed, but I felt a chill. Our walk had taken us to a street that ran by the woods above the railroad yard and the scene of our raid. I felt self-conscious out in the open, so close to where we had committed our crime. Boy, that guy was scary, huh? The guy in the railroad yard? Billy leaned on his handlebars. Just a guy. Really big, though. He had you pretty spooked, didn't he? Then he was kind and added, I was spooked too, but I couldn't just leave you there. Man, I was scared, I gotta say. He could have got me good. I had the flares in my hand and everything. Whew, Mom would have beat my ass for sure. Billy nodded. Yeah, it sounds like your mom takes things pretty serious. That she does. I was going to tell him why I thought that guy was scary and why I was so frozen. I wanted to tell him, to get it off my chest, but suddenly Billy launched into action. He swung onto his bike and dropped off the sidewalk onto a rough trail down a shallow dip into a gravel parking lot full of potholes. I watched him descend and bounce through the bumps and then across a driveway behind a building and then reappear on the opposite side. He had to pump like crazy up a trail that brought him back to the finish, panting and smiling. Try it, he said, and he pushed the bike to me. The same confidence that took me into the railroad yard carried me over the crest of that hill. After the first bump, though, confidence deserted me, and I was no longer riding the bike. We just shared the same path. Even then, for a brave moment, I thought things would be fine. But at the turn at the building was my demise. I parted with the bike and skidded across the gravel on my forearm, arriving on my face at the front door of a low, wide building. Concrete is hard and asphalt messy, but for scar-making, meat-grinding bodily harm, there is nothing like using your forearm for a brake when falling off a bicycle on a gravel parking lot. Yeah, I screamed. Billy got down the hill nearly as fast as I did. He came, I suppose, to kick my butt for wrecking his bike for the second time. Panting, though, he leaned over me with his hands on his knees. Shit, are you okay? My right arm had a few scrapes and hurt like fire, but my left arm was bleeding through the gravel and the dirt, where a patch of skin the size of my palm had been scoured away. Nah, I'm okay, I moaned, picking the large pieces of gravel out of my arm. I could feel the tears leaving tracks through the dirt on my cheeks. Billy didn't seem to notice. Boy, can you yell, he said. Are you hurt bad? Do you want to go home? No. Sorry I scared you, though. And I'm sorry about your bike, too. Again. I shook my foolish head. I had to get my mind off my aching arm, though. And I looked up from the ground, and there was a pair of double doors with a fancy awning staring back at me. Instantly, something clicked in my head. It seemed that everywhere I turned in this neighborhood, there was something new and different, something fat with invitation. Even with the blood running down my arm, I wanted to get up and walk right through those doors. Billy retrieved his bike and checked it for damage. Bike's no problem. Can you walk and everything? Oh yeah, sure. I stared at the building looming above me. Its doors were carved with a bull caribou, and straps of black iron ran across the door from the hinges to the edge of the door. But the iron door handle was chained and padlocked. Alone in the middle of this giant gravel lot, the building squatted, dark and mysterious. It called to me like a mountain to be climbed. Wow, that building looks kind of cool. Let's check it out, I said to Billy. What? The look he gave me was full of questions, but he kept them to himself and followed me across the lot. This is the Caribou Club, he said. It never opened, I guess. Grandma said it was a really weird deal. There were advertisements for a big grand opening with a band and all that stuff, and then the earthquake hit, and it just never opened. We walked all the way around the place, wading through dandelions to peek in painted windows. We kicked at bottles poking out of the weeds and pulled hopelessly at locked doors. Doesn't anyone ever come here, I asked. My arm was no longer hurting. It ached a little, but the building was drawing me near. Nobody. See for yourself. There aren't even any car tracks. Billy was right. Here sat a building surrounded by houses, people, and cars, but it was left completely alone. Inspiration came when I casually tried the knob at the back door. The knob turned and the door started to open, but it was stopped by a padlock. Wait a minute, said Billy, pointing at the lock. Check that out. The padlock was in place, but it wasn't locked. Someone had left it unlocked, just for us, just for fun. With the reverence that such luck deserves, my hand closed around the lock and I let my weight hang against it. I was suddenly too tired to take the next step. My head was beginning to ache. It was too soon. Tomorrow, I said, we'll go in together. Billy just smiled and nodded. The magic of the place was strong, but I was feeling hot and woozy after my fall, too weak and unprepared for another adventure. Tomorrow would be soon enough, after I had dreamed up the mystery of this place. We were walking home along Hollywood Drive when I had the courage to tell the truth. I'm sorry about your bike. You know, I haven't actually ridden a bike much. No kidding. How could I tell? We both laughed as Billy imitated my crazy downhill ride. The world was suddenly brighter. The next day, our trip back to the Caribou Club was delayed when we joined up with Masick and Taylor, something I hadn't done since the incident at the railroad yard. I wasn't sure how to react to them running off like they did, or getting me in that fix in the first place. But when Masick showed up at my door and begged me to hang out with them, I couldn't resist. Unlike where Masick lived, the streets in Taylor's neighborhood were curbless and unpaved. Instead of rows of similar houses centered on green lots, here it seemed like a giant broom just swept up some big and small houses and scattered them onto untidy lawns along Bluff Road. Taylor's family lived here with other Air Force families who could find homes only a mile from the base. We were supposed to meet at a vacant lot that was Taylor's hangout. The lot, it turned out, was not vacant at all, but contained a collapsed fence, a ton of garbage, and a Quonset hut that sat in the middle of the weeds like an elephant with a broken back. A wall of alders created a barrier from the road, and I was several yards into the lot before I could actually see the worn-out Army shelter. A Quonset hut is a ready-made building used by the Army all over Alaska. It had a curved roof that went to the ground to form walls, so it looked like a Quaker Oats box cut in half. Gray plywood covered the windows and the door didn't latch. It was propped closed with a stick. My new friends were hiding in the hut and leaped out with the da-da-da-da-da-da of machine gun fire. Nice try, suckers. Boy, are you scary, I jeered. Where you been? Demanded Masick, posing like a military officer in his cutoffs. I had some things to do. Well, gosh, we've been waiting forever. Well, speaking of things to do, you two sure were brave soldiers at the railroad yard, I returned in a volley to Masick and Taylor. Just 'cause you're dumb enough to stand around and get caught, chided Taylor. Yellow bellies, I answered. Taylor made a fist and stuck out what little chest he had, ready to defend his honor. Billy, who seemed to have his words for emergency, saved all of us from having to fight. You guys were lucky you ran when you did. That guy was a monster. I thought he was going to eat us alive. He threw me a bone, too. Yeah, that guy was B.I.G. big. Sam just stood right up to him, though. The guy says, "What are you doing here?" And old Sam just looks innocent and pie and just says, "Just looking around." He patted me on the back while he laughed. He had the other two with him by then. "Just looking around," he says, when he got a handful of flares right behind his back. I took the lead then. And the guy was so dumb, I heard myself say, when he asked me my name, I'm like choking, you know. And Billy goes, "Oh, he's Joey, and I'm Frank. We're brothers." It was great. The two of us laughed, remembering our fear. Masick traded his anger for fascination. Well, then what happened? Did he call the cops or what? Taylor wasn't impressed, or maybe he was jealous. They don't call the cops on kids, you twerp. Nah, he just yelled at us and we said, "Yes, sir," about a zillion times, and then we split. Speaking of splitting, let's go. I only got a couple hours, said Billy. And we were off to the new hangout in the gully. Masick tried to make a smart remark, but Taylor pushed him into the weeds and charged down the path that led us down behind the Quonset hut and into the woods. We gave up the Quonset hut because there was too many kids who knew about it to be a good hangout. And even high school kids came there sometime to drink beer and neck with girls. Billy and I hung back behind the others, and I kept thinking about the man in the railroad yard and what I hadn't told Billy before. I never met a Negro before, I told him. Billy was caught by surprise. You what? The guy in the railroad caboose. I never met or even talked to a Negro before. Really? He said. Well, that's no big deal. I know lots of black people, and they're just people. Except for one thing. Don't call them Negroes. They're called blacks. Have you ever met a Mexican before? Well, I don't think so. Well, meet one now, he said. He stood looking up at me to make sure the other boys didn't hear. I'm half Mexican. I gaped at him, and all I could say was, cool. We reached the gully, and as soon as we looked down into it, I was sure. It was like the places I found along the Buffet at Nilchik, where the steep bank was notched by a stream and filled with fallen trees and weeds. The spot was wider and had even some of the large spruce trees sticking out of the tangled alders and elderberry bushes. Partway down, the trail disappeared, and we walked into a wall of Devil's Club. I took the lead then, proud to show my backwoods skills. Rather than try to climb around the prickly barriers, I stomped on the base of the stalk, pushed one tall plant over onto several others. And so, step by step, I proceeded to tramp a path through the weeds. Gone were the roads and the city that had imprisoned us. We had entered a jungle and become great explorers. I wished for a machete to help my explorer image. I grabbed a stick instead and slashed bravely at the cow parsnip stalks that rose higher than my head. The mosquitoes were a reality that couldn't be ignored, though, and I stopped to pull a tiny jar of mosquito repellent from my pocket. Yes, I'd come prepared. My companions cheered, but soon I found that what I already knew. Nothing could hold off mosquitoes forever. Luckily, we broke out into the sunlight by the creek, and the host of mosquitoes resigned themselves to short forays out of their shaded bushes. A chunk of old metal roofing lay half in the creek, and we decided to use it to make the roof for a lean-to between two trees and cover that with brush for camouflage. Okay, first, everybody has to bring some food so we can eat down here whenever we want, said Billy. He didn't look it, but he was a serious eater who took it personally if an hour passed without a snack. Masick voted for soda pops and comics. Taylor and I argued that first we needed some building materials. I saw some electric company stuff up by the road, I volunteered. There's some cross planks. You know those boards that fit on top of power poles? They're just waiting for us. It took a better part of 2 hours, but we managed to get 6 of them down the hill and stacked next to the metal roofing. Then starvation set in and Billy had to get home, so we climbed the hill, taking a second path in order to make an escape route. We came out on the road, tired, dirty, and hungry, and I wished I had enough money to go to the Big G drive-in for a root beer and a sundae. I hardly noticed when Billy left. He went quietly, a little embarrassed to have to check in at home, but the others were too tired to razz him and I was too sympathetic. Then I had an idea, and I called after him. Wait up, Billy. I broke into a run. All day I'd been thinking about the Caribou Club, that great empty building waiting to be explored. I couldn't shake the nearly sinister fascination it held for me. Perhaps I'd hit my head in the bike wreck and woke up like a newborn goose, imprinting on the first thing I saw. Or maybe the forlorn aspect of something so neglected touched my sense of empathy, like the little girl in my apartment building with her belly button forehead. The gully was remote and filled with mosquitoes and reminded me of home, but the Caribou Club was something new and mysteriously exotic. I wanted to make it mine like nothing else in this world of teenagers with cars and adults, the people with all the power. If I could have the Caribou Club, no trespassing would protect me. I'd already be inside, away from the bugs in the gully. My spirits were revived, and it was time for action. Let's go to the club today, I said, catching up to Billy, trying to be casual. You mean the Caribou? Yeah. What about the other guys? Just you and me first. Got a flashlight? Yeah, I could see the idea was growing in his mind. I'll see you in about an hour. I got to check in first. We'll meet at the gas station. I was sitting on the curb watching for fancy Mustangs when Billy trotted up with a green military-looking flashlight clipped to his belt. "Wow, you should have seen the cool Mustang that just came by," I said. "Jet black, chrome wheels, what a beauty." "Any Corvette Stingrays?" he asked. "That's my favorite car." He stared hopefully down the hill at the string of pickups, station wagons, and sedans that rushed into sight around the corner. I shook my head, but he didn't see. He just grabbed my arm and pointed at a Corvette, a car right from the future, gliding past in a flash of burgundy and silver. And as he turned his head to follow its path, I saw it reflected in his eyes, a burgundy ghost passing across the mirror of his soul. "Let's go," I said. Today wasn't for Corvettes, Mustangs, or Chevy Nomads. We were heading for unexplored territory. There was a concrete reality that waited for the two of us in that building in the weeds. We walked the long way around the baseball field and approached the club from the alders in the back, stepping quickly to the door and without hesitation or breath. Once across the threshold of temptation, we froze. The building was cold and dark. It swallowed us as if the metal door was the clamping jaw of a great beast that had risen from the muddy waters of Cook Inlet and gobbled us up. Our fear was no longer fear of getting caught. It was fear of the dark and the unknown, the fear made bigger by our imaginations. The black, the mystery, the building itself, all held our total attention so completely that there was no room to even recognize that we had actually once more crossed that line. No trespassing. Violators will be prosecuted. Unmoving, we waited together in the darkness that slowly grew to a weak twilight as our eyes adjusted to the bits of light that filtered through the boarded-up windows. "Come on, amigo," I said bravely. "Let's see what we got." "Roger Wilco," said my partner, and we flooded the hallway with light from our flashlights. Before us stretched a long hall without doors or windows, its floor covered with paper and crushed boxes. Beyond, a curtain of false night challenged our lights and shortened our strides. We crept, attempting silence. The floor was tile and our shoes refused to whisper and instead announced our progress no matter how we moved them. Shuffling scattered the papers, making them rattle like dried leaves. Walking on tiptoe made our sneakers squeak and clomp. "Why are we sneaking?" Billy asked. "I don't know." We crept on. Suddenly the darkness dissolved, and before us opened the mouth of a room so large that it threatened to swallow our tiny lights and us. We shrank back and swung our beams to the corners, to the roof, to the far wall, creating dancing shadows that filled the cavern with bat-like motion. "Something's in here," I whispered. "Nah, just us. Hold your light still." I heard Billy breathing, heavy like I had at the railroad yard. Our four eyes followed the path of the light across the expanse, where someone moved, a shadowed, spirit-like breathing motion that beckoned us across the canyon of silence. "Who's there?" challenged Billy, in a voice drained of confidence, yet loud enough to echo in the Grand Canyon of the mystery. How small I felt next to such bravado. How weak and small beside his booming voice. "What's the matter?" he called. "You chicken?" Now fuller and stronger in resonance and confidence, as if draped in some powerful armor, Billy led me through the shadows in an enchanted forest. Sweeping back and forth with the blade of his lamp, it opened a path through the mystery before us, and the motion we detected grew bolder and more real. When the beams of our lights revealed a rumpling curtain that waffled in some breath of wind from the open door, we burst into laughter. The curtains ran along the wall behind a bandstand, and I ran forward and swatted the curtain. The motion made it whisper and sweep away and then back into our faces, making us shiver and laugh again. Parked comfortably on the bandstand, we played a game with the lights against the ceiling and the walls and the floor. And then we saw for the first time that the floor was covered with blank restaurant receipts, spread about as far as we could see into the unexplored shadows of the stronghold. Somebody's beat us to it, I observed. Yes, we have, snarled Billy in his scariest voice. And I turned to face him, jumping back at the specter. Billy had the flashlight held between his face so that it showed grotesquely on his open mouth and squinting eyes. You jerk. I lunged for him and he fled into the unknown, with me at his back waving frantically with my flashlight. Without knowing it, we entered another room through a great door. I tackled him in the sea of papers, and there we rolled like fighting cats, kicking and shouting obscenities, till we bumped against a restaurant counter. We raised ourselves by the legs of stools bolted to the floor and leaned over the counter behind our lights. We each sat on a padded stool, and I imagined ordering from a pair of young beauties in uniforms of red and white, with short skirts that showed their legs. Hey, sweetie, give me a double burger with cheese and a milkshake. Make mine a malted and a BLT. Wouldn't it be great to have your own restaurant, Billy said? To have your own waitress. No bossy high school kids, no parents, I added. Don't wish that. What? Then I realized what I'd said, and I realized that I'd forgotten that I'd lost one parent and remembered that it wasn't a game. That's not cool. Trust me, Billy said. My mouth was wide open, but I closed it before my foot got there. Through the eerie light, Billy's face chilled me, the way it seemed to fade and shimmer like the curtains behind the bandstand. And I passed over my curiosity and chose a different angle. Well, should we let Taylor and Masick in on our action? Why not? There's a whole stage for Masick to make an ass of himself on. Yeah, and Taylor can be the bartender or the bouncer. If we can keep their big mouths shut, they're morons, you know. We sat on the counter, spinning on the stools, making fun of our friends while the batteries ran down in our flashlights. We hurried out into the daylight to call our friends and convince them to abandon the gully forever. My dreams on the walk home were filled with lights and parties and sleepovers at a new Caribou Club, with its floor swept clean and a place to play cards and listen to music where no one but us was in charge. Thank you. Join me again next time for Chapter 7, when we see how things go when the boys explore more of the Caribou Club.